Hello and welcome back to TWTV for another video verdict. Joining me, Jim Cooper, outside the home of Newcastle United, St James's Park, as we look back on Newcastle United 3, Ipswich Town 0. And I'm joined by TWTD writers Phil Ham and Kallum Brisset. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
Another post-mortem of another game.
They are post-mortems, these, aren't they? They're like, let's get into it. A game where I thought we were going to get annihilated, to be honest, but I thought we were doing really well until one of the key moments. And Kallum, let's start off there. Talk us through the key moments of the game, please.
I mean, first of all, the key thing to mention is that is now it done, which obviously everybody watching this will be aware of. We are going back to the Championship. That's now mathematically confirmed. But on the game, I thought the game was Newcastle dominated the territory and the possession, but I thought we were well in it. And I think that was echoed by Sam Morsey, who spoke to after the game.
McKenna as well.
Yeah, up until kind of the red card, as you say, we didn't look too threatening. It was more pouncing on mistakes, but there were mistakes that were made. We looked a reasonable threat on the counter-attack, but it comes down to the sending off, which is the point you're referencing. The fifth red card that we've had this season, the second in consecutive games. This one was for Ben Johnson. Felt kind of a similar vibe to the Axel Tuanzebe one at Villa, in the case where
Very much so.
the first one is controversial, but then once you're on the yellow card, you can't really have any complaints with the second one. The first one is he gets punished for simulation. He's judged to have dived right on the edge of the box as he's trying to burst past Dan Burn, who had a leg stuck out. Whether there was some contact, enough contact, I'm not sure. Maybe not enough for a foul, but I don't think it's a dive.
Do you think, Kallum, that the referee's thinking, I've got to give him a yellow, if not, it's a red card because he's through on goal?
He might be thinking, if it's not a penalty, it's a dive. I think it's neither. I think there's a world where it is neither. And
that was Kieran McKenna's opinion as well.
And I think this was one of them. It was only 7 minutes later that Alexander Isak gets the wrong side of him down the left-hand side, and he keeps hold of him for far too long, brings him down, and gives the referee little choice but to brandish the second yellow.
I think that's what the thing, Kallum. He kept his hands around him just too long. You could almost see the ref didn't want to send him off, but his hands were around him for long enough that he had no choice.
He did. And,
I think Kieran's perspective. Sorry,
no,
Kieran's perspective on that really was similar to Callum's there. Really, that the decision itself, it can be neither a foul and neither a simulation. I think it was a foul. It looks a blatant foul. Dan Burn's got such long legs, it's quite difficult to get round them when they're stuck out like that. I don't think it was a penalty. I think it would have been a free kick, wouldn't it? I think it was just outside the area.
I think it was just outside,
And I don't know, yes. But I think there isn't a bit of an anomaly. And like you said, once he's booked, then the second one is definitely a yellow card. But Kieran kind of said, you've got referee perhaps has to referee with a bit more kind of sense in that. It's not the phrase he used, but that given the first one was contentious or potentially contentious, and the second one comes so soon afterwards and was his first foul of the game. And he did point out that he's now lost two fullbacks in games to red cards for their first foul. Referring back to Axel at Villa. And I think it's as you say, we were kind of competing. I think the first half an hour or so had gone as well as we would have wanted it to have gone, really.
Yeah, I think the game, in terms of how it panned out, I think Newcastle were, as I say, the more dominant side, but we had the game where we wanted it after 35 minutes, whereas from the red card onwards, I think at the moment Ben Johnson gets sent off, is there anyone inside the stadium who thinks Newcastle aren't going to go on and win the game?
And that's the thing about it, it's just a shame. It just kills the game, doesn't it? And the game goes away. But I thought, coming back to what you're saying, I thought we were doing really well, and they were really struggling with Enciso and Delap. And the difference between the home game, we were blown away from the start. They were pushed right on us. But because Delap and Enciso were threatening them, we were pushed up, and it was a different kind of game, and we were quite in it. But then there was that moment.
We almost got to half time, which I think is the bit you were going to touch on. It was the 5 minutes before the half time whistle were 5 of the most chaotic minutes I think I've ever seen. The post was hit, the Wolfenden cleared one off the line. Newcastle fans were incensed that they didn't have a penalty. It looked a penalty live to me. So when it did go to VAR and it was then given, I wasn't surprised.
There's a similarity also with the foul on Johnson. If we're talking about contact, there wasn't a whole lot of contact from. I know Enciso pulled him back, but he pulled him back. But that wasn't why he went to ground, was it? And I think there was probably more contact on Johnson. So if you're only talking about minimal contact and you give a penalty at one end, then I think probably you should have given the decision at the other.
And it was chaos at that point. It's rare that when you get both sets of fans saying to the ref, "You don't know what you're doing," because he just lost control at that point. It was like
at that point the atmosphere ramped up, didn't it?
And it was good because it was good in your way, and you probably didn't hear us because we were up in the clouds.
Not an awful lot.
I thought I heard you quite a lot actually.
Yeah.
But
they were relatively quiet though.
Felt like you were miles away, I've got to be honest.
Yeah.
But
it felt like we were miles away.
It's like watching a game from a building quite near the ground.
We were talking about in the week the last time we were here for the 2002 Shearer game where he missed a penalty at last minute. You felt like you were up in the gods, and it felt like it again today. In fact, we've got some footage of coming up the stairs that we've had to speed up by 8 times just to make it normal. Kallum, do you want to take us through the teams today? Because we've got quite a lot of change.
Yeah.
And I think in a way there were some performances in there I was quite pleased with.
Yeah, there were 4 changes to the side. We spoke last week about the lengthening absentee list. In the week, Kieran McKenna said it would be quicker to name the players who were available than weren't. At that point, we had 10 down as the magic number in terms of players who were missing. I think it ended up being 11 by the time the team sheet came around. Axel Twanzebe not involved.
Any news on that? Do we know what that was?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Kieran just said it was managing. It basically to do with the hamstring problem he had is just kind of managing it and sort of protecting him a bit. Similar situation with Jens Kajusta that he'd played a lot of games lately. So so no serious injuries. And really he said that Kajusta and Omari Hutchinson really had just sort of travelled to kind of support rather than actually take much part in the game, which shows quite how short we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the point, isn't it? Hutchinson was on the bench where they come on. But take us through the starting 11.
2 youth players on the bench, which I think is part of the point that Phil's making there. It was 4 centre halves across the back 4, very, very Pep, very Arteta-like. You felt, but that's the situation we were in. Jacob Greaves had to go out to left back. Dara O'Shea had to move out to right back. 2 players who are not alien to those positions. We've seen Dara play right back for us already this season. It meant it was Burgess and Wolfenden at the heart of the defence, a pairing we've seen before. And I think, despite conceding 3 goals, I thought those 2 in particular were quite good. Burgess, I thought, it felt like Newcastle's game plan, particularly in the first half, was kind of death by 1,000 crosses. And Cameron Burgess and Jacob Greaves as well were dealing with that. We're dealing with most of that. I want to pick up Luke Wolfenden because he's not been in the team a lot recently. I thought if I had to go for a name, there weren't any standouts. If I had to pick one out, I'd probably go for Luke Wolfenden. There was the clearance off the line I mentioned from...
There's a couple of clearances.
From
Bruno Guimaraes, one in particular. That was just before the goal went in that chaotic period I mentioned. But yeah, I thought the back 4, despite conceding 3 goals, it feels like we've said this quite a lot this season. I thought there were some okay performances.
And can I say that I thought Greaves has been struggling in recent performances. I thought he had a pretty good game. It's tough for him in an unorthodox position for him.
Yeah,
but I thought he had a good game. He had some good moments. He stood up. He was quite quick at times.
Unorthodox position. Yeah. Was dealing with Jacob Murphy, who's been a man in fine form. Got past him a few times, but I thought generally his aerial presence was what particularly impressed me today in terms of the crosses coming in, because like I say, it felt like that was a big tactic of Newcastle's. I'm not entirely sure why that was, but that's how it felt. And I thought for the most part that was dealt with quite well. And the other change we mentioned, other than Kajusta, was Delap coming back in up front.
Who I thought really was doing well at the start. He had a hilarious running battle with a few of their defenders through the game. Phil, over to you. What do you think of the central midfielders today? Because I thought Morsey and Taylor were up against it, but they had moments.
I'd say it's a bit like last week. It's sort of Kieran talked last week about being 2 different games, didn't he? And I think at 11v11, they were doing quite well, weren't they? I thought Morsey was having a bit of a battle with Willock, wasn't he? That
they enjoyed that.
They both enjoyed it, and I think VAR had a couple of looks at their situation, but then you did, once it got to 10v11. They just had to sit in and try and sort of. It was just damage limitation, was it? And Kieran's perspective in his press conference was 11v11 was we did pretty well. 10v11 the challenge was too much, and I think it's just inevitable, and I think that's sort of to some degree sums up the season to some extent that. And as a point he's made on a number of occasions, that we've got to be at our very tip-top best to compete in games, and losing a player obviously means you're not going to be, and so there's kind of there's almost an inevitability that the opposition will win, and so really,
and it was I think it's our 5th red of the season, isn't it? Four of them have been 2 yellows, and it spoilt some games for us in what is a short season.
And actually, we were talking in the press room that really most of them have been quite contentious, haven't they? Really, Transavi's one, the one today, the Calvin Phillips one against Leicester, when really the referee should have blown up for a penalty prior to that, and actually he was pulling out of the challenge. We've been a bit unfortunate, really, to pick up the cards that we have. And
as Kallum said, we're mathematically down now. It's over. We've known it probably since. The Bournemouth game was such fun, wasn't it? We enjoyed talking about that afterwards. But we've been down since the Wolves home game, I think.
Yeah, I just want to touch on the fans. I will have to shoot off. I've got a train to catch.
Callum's got a train to catch
in a couple of minutes.
We're rushing through this today.
The last one south, so I better make that. But just want to touch on the supporters, because I think, Phil might have heard them more than I did, but that was just because they were in the gods. You could tell 3,200 of them. Every game's been sold out. Obviously, the journey's been so good, and the journey's not over. And I think that was reflected at the end. The reception they got was excellent for the players and the coaching staff when they all went over. It almost got louder in stoppage time before the whistle went. It was kind
the
of
town fans you could hear at the end of the game.
I think the point is that actually they'd seen a pretty heartening display up until the red card. Do you know what I mean? We're in the game, we were fighting, we weren't being blown away like we were in the home game. But what was really good is at the end, the players stayed for so long because no town fans were leaving, everyone was singing, and I think that's a positive. And I just really hope that we can get a home victory in the last 2 games against Brentford and West Ham, so we can kind of give the home fans a little bit something, because it's been better in a way on the road, I think.
The home form hasn't. That's when we sit back and reflect on the season, which I'm sure we're going to do in the coming weeks. The home form's one of the biggest,
and results against teams. It's not the Newcastles and the Arsenals.
Absolutely,
they're not the result. It's the, and I've said sort of run of the mill Premier League teams, but these run of the mill teams are still very, very good, and miles ahead of the teams who are being at the top of the championship.
They're so established. They're so rich. They've got such a.
Their squads are so strong, and they've got such international squads, which we will talk about in the next few weeks. But I thought today, I felt like we looked like we'd grown into it a little bit today. Anyway, Callum's going to go.
I'm going to have to shoot.
Callum's going to go and train. So thank you.
I'll leave you to it.
Yeah, leave us to it.
We'll carry on.
We'll carry on for a second. Thank you so much for tuning into TWTV again.
Good luck. Give me a call if you don't make the train.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll give you a lift back in the car. One thing to say though, Phil, we have won the statue challenge, because I'm not sure if you've seen the Sir Bobby Robson
statues. I have seen it on a number of occasions.
We've got Alan Shearer behind us here, but I have to say our Sir Bobby Robson statue is significantly better than theirs. I think this one looks a little bit like a Cabbage Patch doll, perhaps.
I thought it looked like David Pleat from a photo I saw earlier. But it's... I think ours is much superior, and
And I think the Alan Shearer one, you kind of know it's him just by his gesture rather than any resemblance to his face.
I think there's also a Jackie Milburn statue somewhere, isn't there?
I haven't seen
another town manager.
And we may have some noises in the background because there's a huge box park they've built behind here, which is full of Geordies having a great time right now. Any other things from McKenna in the press room? How was his vibe again today?
I think resigned. I think as he said. Because people asked him a couple of questions about relegation being confirmed today. I said, we've known realistically since the Wolves match, and so I've been, asked this about it a few times, and would there have been things done differently? And he kind of said, well, we'll reflect on it all at the end of the season, keep most of that in house. But I think he was kind of. I think on the touchline today, we felt he was kind of quite frustrated. I was going to say probably largely because 2 weeks running, we've been in a very similar situation in games where we've needed to be at our best and at our and being down to 10 men in the first half is obviously makes it a very, very tough situation. But in his press conference, he was his usual self, really. And I think 4 games to go. I think we'll kind of he'll be looking to get positive results. He did praise the fans for their, said it was humbling.
They really stayed for a long time.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like, they were there, they didn't want to leave, they could see what it meant to the fans, and it was a good connection as we've seen before.
And I think we talked before about Town situation compared with Leicester and Southampton, and I don't think you're probably getting that at Leicester. I don't think you're getting that with Southampton. I think we're coming down in a much more united manner, the club itself, I think, and also the fans and the clubs, because it's not, I think fans realise what a tough job it was this year to try and survive in the Premier League, and that we gave it a good go. I think you can look back at individual games and think we ought to have taken points to that, we ought to have taken points from that. But when you look at the form that Wolves, the team that were the ones that were kind of nearest to sort of dropping into the relegation zone for most of the season. Look at the form that they've been on since February. It's Champions League form.
Yeah,
they're on better form than anybody else other than Liverpool. So even if we'd put in a fairly decent run, it still wouldn't have been enough probably, unless West Ham continue to.
I think we talked about, didn't we, about Wolves that they were falling apart a little bit. They didn't have the right manager, and then they got the right manager in, and then that massively superior squad, full of international recruitment, as we talked about before,
that's it. I think
kicked in, and they're like they've kicked into another gear, haven't they? Basically, and they just can't keep up with it.
I think yes, they needed a guiding hand to kind of get them in order, because they were, as you say, there was the kind of post-match things that had happened against us, and I think there was a game the previous week. There was players in similar situations. It did have that feel of a club that was falling apart, and they obviously brought in a manager who galvanised things and has put them in remarkable form. So, in the end, it's not enough.
Yeah, and we're mathematically down. We're down now, and I think hopefully McKenna will stay with us through the summer. And hopefully he's learnt a lot of lessons from this, because I think there have been mistakes in some of the recruitment, perhaps the setup in certain games. But, maybe our goal is to go a bit yo-yo, keep building, bounce back up again. But, we need to learn from this and come back stronger.
He did speak about the kind of, someone put is the aim to be a yo-yo club thing, and he kind of laughed. He said, well, I don't think anyone really kind of aims to be a yo-yo club. But then he kind of talked about Bournemouth, talked about Fulham, and how they established themselves in the Premier League, having gone up, had a season where they got relegated, and then come back again. And I think it's that kind of building over time. That people have always talked about with the Premier League ever since it was sort of established 30 years ago. But I think it's even more the case now that that you need to kind of establish yourself or build your squad for the Premier League over a number of seasons. Some of those seasons being seasons that are outside the Premier League. But yes, so next season, as I say, I think we'll go down as probably the strongest of the three. I think Leeds and Burnley going up is very good news for us, and I think it would be even better news for us if Sheffield United go up as well, because they're obviously the strongest three teams in that division, and Luton could possibly go down. I don't see Luton sort of bouncing back next year to be a kind of the form of most parachute sides, because I don't think that their squad is quite strong enough. So I think we kind of all now have to look to next season, hope we get a few results at the end of this season, but everything is now focused on another promotion next season.
And maybe the recruitment that wasn't quite right for the Premier League maybe have been perfect for a championship promotion.
We said this the other day, that if we'd have gone out and recruited a lot of perhaps overseas players who were coming, being sold the Premier League dream, would we be in the position we are going into next season? Whereas I think bringing in people like Jacob Greaves and Jack Clark, who are top championship players in the previous season, I think we're well set up next year for a decent championship side. And as you said,
the likes of Jack Clark, I think will have a good season. I think Hurst will have a good season. I think
Alex Clark in goal Alex Palmer in goal is another very a top Championship performer. So I think we will lose one or two players. Obviously, Liam Delap will go. It looks like Cameron Burgess will probably go, but I don't see huge numbers. And even so, squads now are so big. I think there's still the core of the squad that came up, but that will be there that kind of took us up 2 divisions. But that's augmented with people like Greaves and Palmer and Clark and
I think the likes of Jack Taylor could have a very good season.
Jack Taylor's
you forget these names.
Yeah.
Okay, we better close it off there.
We should, yeah.
Just to say, it's been really nice coming up to Newcastle. Really friendly welcome from all the locals.
Press officer,
as we left, they were at the Newcastle fans had congregated at the away end exit and were cheering us out as we went,
very nice,
singing some Bobby Robson, which is fantastic. Not quite the welcome for Jack Clark, though. He was slightly singled out being an ex-Sunderland fan. But it's been a great trip up here. It's one of the best stadiums I think we've been to this season. It's a shame that mathematically we're now down. But we'll be back again as we try to close out the season for, I think it's the penultimate game at Goodison Park.
Yeah.
So we'll see you next Saturday for another video verdict after the Everton away game. Thanks again, as always, for tuning in. And please like and subscribe.